Sometimes the smallest hand can change the world. Ethan Walker whispered under his breath as he stepped into the crowded auction hall, the scent of old wood and polished floors mingling with the anxious hum of spectators. Sunlight streamed through high windows, casting pale stripes across the worn benches, and in the corner lay Scout, a German shepherd with a coat of silver and cream, his amber eyes wary and alert, paws slightly lifted, trembling with every nervous shift. The room seemed to fade around Ethan as he approached, his boots clicking softly against the hardwood, the echo measured like a heartbeat, each step a quiet declaration of intent. Scout lifted his ears, nostrils flaring as he caught Ethan's presence, the dog's instinct sensing a calm authority that hadn't been felt in weeks. People murmured, whispering and nudging, some shaking their heads at the sight of the injured dog, others crossing their arms, unwilling to step closer. Ethan's broad shoulders and square jaw, dusted with faint silver stubble, moved with a measured grace, eyes scanning the room not for approval, but for the right moment, the right connection. He knelt slowly, hand outstretched, letting Scout approach, the dog's paws scuffing lightly against the wooden floor as he crept forward, sniffing, ears twitching, tail hesitating between caution and trust. Around them, the auctioneer's gavel tapped impatiently, a sound drowned by the tension, the air thick with the scent of old hay and damp coats, the world compressed into the fragile bond forming between man and dog. Ethan's voice, quiet but steady, brushed the air. "It's okay, Scout. I've got you." The dog's amber eyes softened, a glimmer of recognition, and the room seemed to hold its breath, every spectator caught in a suspended moment of possibility. He lifted the bid card with deliberate calm, the movement slow enough that even the bustling crowd felt its weight, and the gavel fell into silence as all eyes turned toward him. Scout stepped closer, brushing against Ethan's boot, and a faint tremor of warmth passed through the dog, the kind that spoke of safety, of being seen, of the quiet miracle of trust forming. Ethan stood, supporting Scout gently, his presence a beacon in the hall's cold light, and for the first time in days, Scout let out a soft whine, not of fear but of recognition, the dog's instinct acknowledging a protector, a savior who required nothing but courage to do the right thing. Outside, the wind rattled the old windows, carrying the scent of rain and the faint whisper of possibility, and inside, a small, almost invisible smile crossed Ethan's face as he felt the shift in the air, the subtle miracle of kindness beginning to unfold in the midst of human doubt and hesitation. The soft hum of the auction hall faded behind them as Ethan guided Scout carefully through the narrow corridor, the dog pressing close against his side, every step measured and deliberate, echoing faintly against the cold concrete walls. Outside, the sunlight slanted through high windows, scattering across dusty floorboards and casting long shadows that danced with the rhythm of their movement. Scout's ears flicked constantly, eyes amber bright, scanning the air for any sign of uncertainty, his tail moving in slow, cautious sweeps as if mapping the space with intuition. Ethan's hands, calloused and steady, adjusted the strap of his jacket, feeling the familiar weight of calm responsibility settle across his shoulders, the quiet discipline of years in service guiding every motion. He spoke softly, more to himself than to the dog. "Almost there, boy. We are almost there." The hallway opened onto a sunlit yard, the sharp scent of autumn leaves mingling with the faint metallic tang of the auction building, and Ethan paused, letting the warmth of the sun brush his face as he surveyed the scene. Scout pressed his nose to the ground, sniffing, then looked up at Ethan, eyes alive with trust and expectation. Beyond the fence, an old wooden barn leaned slightly to the left, weathered but welcoming, its red paint faded into the soft grays of age, and Ethan could feel the hum of anticipation in the air, the sense that something hidden waited to be revealed. With a gentle nod, he guided Scout forward, their feet crunching on the gravel path, the sound steady and grounding, a rhythm that mirrored the steady beating of a heart beginning to hope again. Inside the barn, the air was cool and scented with hay and the faint warmth of sunlight filtering through the slats. Ethan moved with methodical care, setting Scout down gently, letting the dog explore the space with quiet curiosity, the pads of his paws pressing softly against the wooden floor, nails clicking faintly as he pressed his nose to corners. Under benches, around bales of straw, Ethan crouched beside Scout, feeling the weight of presence, of companionship, of unspoken understanding between man and dog, and whispered, "You are safe here. No one can take that from you." A small crate in the corner caught Scout's attention, and he nudged it with his nose, ears pricking forward as if sensing the subtle energy of the space. Ethan approached, lifting the lid slowly, revealing a soft blanket, a bowl, and a note carefully folded, the handwriting delicate and deliberate, an unexpected gift left by the previous caretaker. The light fell across the crate, illuminating the edges of the note, and Ethan read it quietly. A message of care, of trust, of hope for what was to come, and he felt a warmth settle deep into his chest, a quiet confirmation that small acts of kindness ripple far beyond immediate sight. Scout leaned into him, resting his head against Ethan's knee, eyes half closed in relief and contentment, and together they felt the stillness of the moment, the gentle unfolding of a new beginning, the kind of silence that heals and reassures, carrying the promise of connection, trust, and a quiet miracle waiting to bloom in the days ahead. The late afternoon sun poured through the barn windows, casting warm golden stripes across the dusty floor as Ethan walked slowly between the beams, Scout padding silently at his side, amber eyes alert and ears flicked forward, every sense attuned to the subtle shifts in the air. The dog sniffed the corners, tracing invisible currents, while Ethan adjusted the blanket inside the crate, smoothing it carefully with worn hands, feeling the soft fabric beneath his fingers and the quiet weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders like a familiar companion. Outside, the wind stirred the old maples lining the yard, leaves rustling softly, carrying the earthy scent of fall and the faint tang of iron from the distant auction hall, and Ethan paused, listening to the world breathe around him, feeling Scout's steady presence grounding each step, each movement, in patient vigilance. He crouched to examine a small pile of hay that had shifted near the barn door, noticing the slight indentation where Scout's paws had pressed, a subtle mark of curiosity and caution, and he smiled faintly, the corners of his lips lifting as he murmured quietly, "You have a good nose, boy." Scout's tail flicked once, a slow and deliberate motion, eyes meeting Ethan's in a wordless acknowledgement of trust and partnership. The barn seemed to hold its breath as they moved together through the space, beams of light catching dust motes in a slow dance, the quiet creak of wood under their weight harmonizing with the faint hum of the wind outside. Ethan's gaze drifted to a worn wooden shelf along the wall, small trinkets left behind by previous caretakers, and he carefully set a bowl of water for Scout beside the crate, watching as the dog dipped his muzzle, eyes still scanning, muscles relaxed but ready, the loyal rhythm of his movements a comfort in the hushed stillness. A faint sound came from outside, a low whistle of wind across the roof, and Scout's head lifted, ears perking, nostrils flaring as he caught the subtle shift in the air, then turned back to Ethan, tail swaying in measured calm, a signal that all was as it should be, that the barn, the sunlight, and the quiet companionship were enough for now. Ethan straightened, stretching his shoulders, feeling the warmth of late afternoon on his face, and he ran a hand along the edge of the crate again, adjusting the blanket to create a small nest of comfort, the tactile motion grounding him, echoing the quiet discipline instilled over years of service and careful attention to detail. Scout settled finally, resting his head on the blanket, breathing even and deep, eyes half closed but alert, the connection between man and dog palpable in the soft glow of light and the gentle creak of the barn. Ethan stood, stepping back to survey the room, the space filled with calm, the scent of hay, the faint whisper of wind through gaps in the wooden slats, and he allowed himself a small sigh, a quiet exhale of satisfaction, knowing that in this simple act of care, of attention, of silent guardianship, they had forged a bond that could not be broken, that every moment of trust, every gentle gesture, every careful step contributed to a quiet miracle unfolding, and the barn, the light, and Scout's steady gaze reflected the promise of a new beginning, a slow, patient dawn waiting just beyond the shadows. The golden light shifted as the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, spilling long shadows across the barn floor and illuminating the floating dust motes like tiny lanterns caught in midair, while Scout lifted his head, ears swiveling toward the faint rustle of leaves outside, his amber eyes tracking every subtle movement, alert yet calm, a silent sentinel of the space. Ethan crouched beside him, running a hand along the dog's back, feeling the warmth of muscle beneath fur and the slow rise and fall of steady breathing. Each exhale a reminder of trust earned and safety provided. The wind carried the scent of distant pine and crisp earth through the slats of the barn, and Ethan inhaled deeply, letting it anchor him in the moment, in the stillness of this quiet sanctuary they had created together. A narrow window near the ceiling caught the last rays of sunlight, casting a thin, sharp line across the floor that Ethan followed with his gaze, imagining the hours of shadows that would soon stretch long and cold, and he reached to adjust the blanket, smoothing it so Scout could rest more comfortably, tucking a small soft toy into the corner as a token of companionship, a simple gesture that made the space feel more like a home. Scout shifted slightly, settling back onto the blanket, tail curling around his body, eyes softening as they met Ethan's, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them, unspoken yet deeply understood, the kind of communication built from patience, attention, and shared experience. Ethan stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders, and his eyes wandered across the barn, noting the sturdy beams overhead, the faint scratches in the floor from years of use, the small alcoves filled with remnants of past lives, and he felt a sense of reverence for the simplicity and resilience in the space, mirrored in the dog at his side. The air was alive with the quiet hum of late afternoon, the distant birds calling softly, the gentle creak of wood as the structure shifted with the fading warmth, and Ethan moved to open the large double doors, letting in a rush of cool, fragrant air, bringing with it the scent of damp leaves and distant water, the sound of soft wind threading through the trees, carrying a promise of evening calm. Scout stood, alert, tail lifting slightly, head turning toward the new light and sound, and Ethan felt the subtle thrill of anticipation, a sense that the world beyond the barn held unseen wonders, small mysteries waiting to be discovered, moments of connection yet to be experienced. Together they stepped onto the threshold, Ethan's hand brushing Scout's neck, the dog's warmth pressing reassuringly against him, and for a long moment they paused, taking in the expanse of open space, the fading sun painting the landscape in golds and amber, and Ethan felt a deep, settling peace, a quiet sense that in this moment, everything was as it should be. And the gentle rhythm of shared breath and presence between man and dog marked the beginning of an evening filled with promise, reflection, and the subtle magic of a bond forged in patience, kindness, and unspoken trust. The evening settled over the farmstead, stretching the shadows of the maple trees long across the gravel path, the fading sunlight glinting off the edges of weathered wood and casting the barn in a warm, amber glow, while Scout moved quietly at Ethan's side, nose twitching as he traced the faint scents carried by the gentle breeze. Ethan knelt beside the dog, adjusting the strap of the harness and speaking softly, his voice a low murmur that seemed to harmonize with the whispering wind and the soft creak of the barn. "We will figure this out, boy, together." Scout's ears flicked, tail sweeping in a slow rhythm as if affirming the promise, the amber eyes reflecting the fading light with a glow that seemed to carry both trust and anticipation. Ethan's gaze wandered across the yard, taking in the subtle hues of the autumn leaves, the glint of dew on the grass, the worn path leading to the barn doors that had become their temporary sanctuary, and he allowed himself to breathe in the cool air, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly as he absorbed the quiet beauty of the scene. He rose, moving deliberately toward the crate where Scout had rested, lifting the dog gently and placing him on the soft blanket, the motion slow and considered, each movement an act of care and attention. Scout sniffed the edges, then settled, tail curling around his paws, eyes half-lidded in contentment, and Ethan stepped back to survey the space, feeling the warmth of the sun lingering on the floorboards, the soft hum of the wind threading through the rafters, and the subtle scent of hay mingling with the crisp, earthy aroma outside. He reached to open the side door, letting in a slant of golden light that illuminated a small corner of the yard, leaves shimmering in the soft breeze, and Scout's head lifted again, ears attentive, sensing the subtle shift in the air, the faint promise of evening stirring in the quiet movements of the world around them. Ethan walked toward the threshold, hand brushing lightly along Scout's back, feeling the warmth and calm radiating from the dog, the steady rise and fall of his breath a rhythm that anchored him to the present, each step measured and deliberate, carrying with it the quiet resolve of someone accustomed to observing and waiting for the right moment. Beyond the barn, the landscape stretched in soft waves of amber and gold, the horizon outlined with distant trees whispering in the wind, and Ethan paused, letting the scene settle into his senses, the cool air brushing against his face, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his boots grounding him. Scout shifted slightly, resting his head again, but keeping eyes alert, tail flicking in subtle signals of awareness and reassurance, and Ethan allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to play across his lips as he felt the deepening bond between them, the sense of trust and understanding that had grown in quiet moments of care, patience, and attentiveness. The gentle promise of tomorrow stretching beyond the fading light and into the night, a soft and steady assurance that together they could face whatever quietly awaited beyond the shadows. The night descended slowly over the farm, soft shadows stretching across the yard and barn as the amber glow of the last sunlight faded into deep indigo, casting the world in a quiet, contemplative hush. Scout stirred beside Ethan, shifting his weight and lifting his head, ears pricked as if listening to the subtle rhythm of the evening, the faint whisper of wind through the trees carrying scents of damp earth and distant pine, filling the air with a serene stillness. Ethan crouched beside the dog, brushing his hand gently along the fur, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat beneath, the familiar rise and fall of steady breathing a comforting rhythm against the quiet hum of the settling night. He adjusted the blanket in the crate, tucking it carefully around Scout, smoothing out folds to create a small nest of security and calm, and the dog settled with a gentle sigh, tail curling around Paws as amber eyes reflected the dim light filtering through the barn slats. The air was crisp and cool, carrying with it the faint fragrance of autumn leaves and distant water, the subtle sounds of the countryside threading through the night, and Ethan breathed it in deeply, allowing the calm to settle over his shoulders, the weight of responsibility tempered by the simple act of providing care and attention. He rose slowly, stretching the stiffness from his back, and stepped toward the door, pausing to look back at Scout. The dog's head lifted slightly, ears alert but body relaxed, a silent bond of trust passing between them, unspoken yet deeply understood. Beyond the barn, the horizon glowed faintly with residual light, the darkening shapes of maples and pines outlining the landscape in a gentle silhouette, and Ethan felt the subtle thrill of anticipation, the sense that even in quiet moments, possibility lingered, waiting to unfold in small, significant ways. He moved to the side of the barn, opening the door wider to let in the cool evening breeze, the faint rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of wildlife blending into a gentle symphony of nature's rhythms, and Scout's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, scanning for the unseen details carried on the wind. Ethan's eyes followed the horizon, tracing the faint shapes of distant hills and the soft shimmer of a narrow stream reflecting the last light, and he allowed himself a quiet smile, the simple pleasure of presence, of connection, of being fully immersed in the subtle beauty of the moment, carrying with it a quiet assurance that small acts of care and attention ripple beyond the immediate, shaping the world in ways unseen yet deeply felt. Scout shifted slightly, resting his head against the blanket again, eyes half closed, and Ethan crouched to smooth a few stray strands of fur along the dog's neck, whispering softly, "We will see tomorrow together, boy," step by step. And in that shared silence, the night wrapped around them like a gentle promise, the barn, the fading light, and the steady warmth of companionship marking a small, quiet miracle unfolding in real time. A bond strengthened by patience, trust, and the attentive care of one quiet hand guiding the way. The first hint of stars began to pierce the deepening indigo sky as Ethan walked slowly along the gravel path leading from the barn, Scout padding faithfully at his side, ears flicking at every subtle sound, tail moving in measured sweeps that mirrored the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The cool evening air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant pine, mixing with the faint warmth of the barn behind them, and Ethan inhaled deeply, letting the quiet settle through his chest and into his shoulders, the steady weight of responsibility balanced by the calm presence of the dog beside him. Scout paused to sniff a fallen branch, lifting his head and ears sharply at a rustle in the underbrush, then turned back toward Ethan, eyes bright and amber with trust and focus, ready to move at a moment's notice. Ethan crouched for a brief moment, smoothing the dog's fur and murmuring softly, "You did well today, boy," every step with patience, and Scout leaned slightly against him, the subtle pressure a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged through careful attention and shared understanding. Beyond the yard, the fading light glinted across a narrow creek, its surface reflecting the first shimmer of stars, and Ethan allowed his gaze to wander over the landscape, noting the gentle undulations of the hills, the shifting shadows of trees, and the quiet hum of nature settling into night, each sound and scent layered into a gentle symphony of calm. The barn door creaked softly in the gentle breeze, and Ethan stepped forward, opening it wider to allow more of the cool night air to flow in, carrying with it the scent of distant wildflowers and the subtle rustle of wildlife moving unseen, Scout following closely, alert but composed, each movement a testament to his discipline and trust. Ethan's hands rested briefly on the edge of the door, feeling the smooth worn-wood beneath his fingers, the texture grounding him in the moment, and he allowed himself a small smile at the simplicity of presence, the quiet miracle of connection unfolding between man, dog, and the world around them. Scout lowered his head again, tail curling around his paws as he settled, ears still flicking with awareness, and Ethan straightened, taking a step back to observe the dog, the barn, the yard bathed in the gentle glow of early night, feeling a deep sense of reassurance that their careful attention, patience, and kindness had created a space where trust and safety could flourish. The soft whistle of wind through the nearby maples carried a gentle promise of tomorrow, of discovery, of quiet moments yet to come, and Ethan inhaled again, letting the night enfold him, the bond with Scout a steady pulse beneath his fingertips, a constant reminder that even in the stillness, even in the quiet of the darkening world, small acts of care and courage ripple outward, shaping the world in ways often unseen but deeply felt, and together, they moved slowly toward the horizon, the fading light glinting off the edges of the barn and the first glimmering stars above, a gentle affirmation of trust, companionship, and the quiet magic of presence that fills the space between one heartbeat and the next. The pale light of early night settled over the farm, painting long shadows across the gravel and the worn wooden planks of the barn, and Scout stirred beside Ethan, shifting slightly, amber eyes bright. Ears perked as he sensed the faint hum of life around them, the subtle movements of the world in quiet rhythm. Ethan knelt beside the dog, brushing a gentle hand along the curve of his back, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat beneath fur, each exhale a pulse of trust, a reminder of the bond that had grown through shared presence and careful attention. The soft whisper of wind through the nearby maples carried the crisp scent of autumn and distant earth, blending with the faint warmth from the barn, and Ethan inhaled deeply, letting it fill his lungs, grounding him in the stillness and in the simple act of being there, fully attentive. Scout lifted his head, tail curling lightly as he sniffed the air, then looked back at Ethan with an almost imperceptible nod of recognition, a silent communication that needed no words, only the shared experience of patience, care, and quiet observation. Ethan's eyes roamed the yard beyond, tracing the gentle undulations of the hills in the moonlight, noting the shimmer of dew along the grass, the subtle sparkle of distant stars reflecting faintly in a narrow creek that cut through the landscape, and he felt a swell of calm, a sense of order and reassurance in the small universe of their immediate surroundings. He stood, stretching his shoulders and letting the quiet settle fully over him, feeling Scout press gently against his leg, the warmth of the dog and the steady, familiar rhythm of his breathing anchoring him to the present. The barn doors creaked slightly in the breeze, and Ethan reached to adjust them, letting in a soft column of cool air, carrying with it the distant calls of nocturnal wildlife and the gentle rustle of leaves, the subtle melody of night threading through the shadows. Scout moved forward a few steps, sniffing deliberately, ears swiveling to catch the faintest movement, then returned to Ethan's side, tail sweeping slowly, a steady signal of reassurance. Ethan bent to smooth the blanket around the dog once more, creating a small nest of comfort and warmth, and he whispered softly, "Tomorrow will be a new day, boy, and we will greet it together," feeling the words carry a quiet weight of promise and care. The horizon beyond glimmered faintly with the last vestiges of moonlight, the world settling into stillness, and Ethan allowed himself a small, reflective smile, feeling the deepening bond of trust and companionship, the subtle magic of presence, patience, and quiet courage stretching between them, holding them steady in the hushed embrace of night, a silent affirmation that even in the smallest, simplest moments of care, a profound miracle unfolds, carried on the shared heartbeat of man and dog. The first light of dawn began to stretch across the horizon, softening the edges of the farm and casting a pale gold hue over the dew-laden grass, while Scout stirred gently beside Ethan, rising on his strong legs and shaking out the last remnants of sleep from his silver and cream coat, ears twitching at the delicate morning chorus of birds and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Ethan stood, stretching slowly, the stiffness of sleep leaving his shoulders, and inhaled the crisp, autumn air, carrying the earthy scent of pine and damp soil, filling his lungs with a sense of calm and renewal. Scout moved a few steps forward, nose low to the ground, tracing familiar scents while remaining alert to the subtle changes in the world around them, amber eyes reflecting the soft light as he scanned the yard and beyond with cautious curiosity. Ethan crouched to smooth the blanket beneath the dog and whispered softly, "Let us see what today holds, Scout," feeling the bond of trust and quiet companionship solidify further with each word, each gentle motion. The barn doors creaked as they swung slightly in the morning breeze, casting shifting patterns of light across the floorboards, and Ethan stepped to the threshold, glancing toward the distant tree line where the faint mist hovered, curling and drifting over the meadow, soft as breath, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and fading frost. Scout padded alongside him, ears flicking with every subtle sound, tail sweeping low and measured, a calm signal of attentiveness and readiness. Ethan's eyes roamed the familiar landscape, noting the shimmer of dew along the worn paths, the glint of sunlight on the stream winding gently through the yard, and the quiet patterns of the world awakening around them, each detail woven into a tapestry of subtle beauty and serene wonder. He felt the weight of stillness and motion intertwined, the gentle assurance that every careful step, every moment of patience, and every act of attentive care contributes to a growing harmony, a silent miracle that threads through time, echoing in the quiet presence of Scout at his side. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and distant woods, and Scout lifted his head, ears erect, eyes bright, signaling the readiness to move forward, to explore, to continue the quiet rhythm of discovery that had begun with simple acts of kindness. Ethan straightened fully, placing a hand gently on Scout's neck, feeling the warmth and trust beneath his fingers, and together they moved toward the edge of the yard, the barn and familiar paths fading slightly behind them as the morning light stretched across the land, illuminating possibilities and unspoken promises. Each step was deliberate, measured, full of the quiet resolve that had guided them through the night and would carry them into the new day, the bond between man and dog resonating in the soft, steady cadence of breathing, the gentle sounds of footfalls, and the unfolding miracle of presence, trust, and shared journey that marked the start of a day filled with quiet wonder, reflection, and the subtle beauty of patience rewarded. The sun climbed higher, spilling pale light across the farm, illuminating the subtle textures of worn wood, the shimmer of dew on the grass, and the gentle sway of maples lining the yard, their leaves catching the soft breeze in a quiet dance. Scout moved beside Ethan, paws pressing lightly into the earth, nostrils flaring as he traced the myriad scents of morning, amber eyes scanning the familiar landscape for the smallest changes, ears tilting to catch the faintest whispers of wind through the branches. Ethan adjusted his jacket, feeling the warmth settle across his shoulders, the calm rhythm of the morning carrying a sense of purpose, grounding him in the simple acts of care and observation that had begun with the dog and now stretched across the space they shared. He crouched briefly to smooth the blanket beneath Scout, fingers brushing gently over the soft fur, listening to the low, contented sigh of the dog, a sound that spoke of trust, comfort, and the quiet joy of being understood. Beyond the barn, the landscape shimmered with the delicate glint of sunlight on dew, the narrow creek reflecting the sky in gentle streaks of pale blue and gold, and Ethan felt a soft pull of anticipation for the day ahead, the subtle promise of discovery in every shadow and curve of the yard. Scout lifted his head, ears alert, tail flicking in measured sweeps, a signal of attention and readiness, and Ethan whispered softly, "Let us see what waits for us today." The words carried on the breeze, a quiet affirmation of connection and shared purpose. He rose, stretching slowly, feeling the gentle tension in his shoulders ease as he breathed in the cool, crisp air, scent of pine and earth filling his lungs, and moved toward the barn door, hand brushing along the worn wood, the familiar textures grounding him in the present. Scout followed closely, stepping lightly across the gravel, and Ethan noted the small movements of the world waking around them. The sway of branches, the distant call of a bird, the subtle shimmer of sunlight on the creek. Each detail a reminder of the gentle rhythm of life and the quiet beauty of attentiveness. He adjusted the crate slightly, tucking the blanket to create a small nest, and Scout lowered his head once more, eyes half-lidded, tail curling around his paws as if settling into the assurance of the morning. Ethan stepped back, hands resting on his knees briefly, absorbing the entirety of the scene, the light, the air, the sounds of the farm weaving together into a quiet harmony that reflected the patience, trust, and care that had been the foundation of their bond. The distant trees whispered with the wind, shadows stretching slowly across the yard, and Scout lifted his head again, ears flicking as he scanned the horizon, signaling readiness for whatever the day might reveal, and Ethan felt the subtle thrill of possibility, the quiet miracle of presence, the unfolding of trust and companionship between man and dog, a rhythm of life that carried beyond sight, beyond sound, yet deeply felt, marking the gentle dawn of a day filled with promise, attention, and the serene wonder of shared existence. The morning sun rose higher, spilling warm light across the farm and glinting off the edges of dew-laden grass, painting long, soft shadows that stretched across the yard and the weathered barn. Scout padded quietly beside Ethan, nose close to the ground as he traced the faint scents of the previous night, ears flicking at every subtle sound, tail moving in steady, slow sweeps that mirrored the rhythm of Ethan's own calm heartbeat. Ethan adjusted the strap of his jacket and breathed deeply, the cool air carrying the earthy fragrance of pine and fresh soil, mingling with the faint warmth lingering from the barn and the sunlight filtering through the leaves. He crouched beside Scout, brushing his hand gently along the dog's back, feeling the warmth, the quiet strength, and the steady rise and fall of each breath, a subtle language of trust and companionship that needed no words. Scout lifted his head, amber eyes scanning the yard and distant tree line, ears moving with precision, attuned to the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of water, and the gentle movements of the world waking around them. Ethan whispered softly, "Let us see what today will bring." The words carried by the soft wind, unhurried and deliberate, a promise of attention, care, and quiet guidance. The barn doors creaked lightly in the morning breeze, and Ethan stepped to open them fully, letting in a wider column of light, the rays illuminating the textures of wood and hay, casting subtle patterns across the floor that shifted with the rising sun. Scout sniffed at the edges of the yard, moving in deliberate steps, alert yet composed, a companion attuned to both Ethan and the environment, every sense in quiet harmony with the soft sounds and scents of early morning. Ethan moved toward the crate, adjusting the blanket carefully, smoothing folds and tucking edges to create a small, secure nest, and Scout settled again, tail curling around his paws. Eyes half closed but bright, reflecting the light and trust between them. Beyond the barn, the The horizon glimmered with soft morning hues, distant hills outlined in a gentle haze, the faint shimmer of a creek reflecting the first rays of sun, and Ethan allowed himself to pause, taking in the entirety of the landscape, the steady rhythm of breath, and the subtle interplay of light, shadow, and movement. He straightened fully, hand resting briefly on Scout's neck, feeling warmth, trust, and a quiet pulse of energy, a reminder that patience, attention, and the careful nurturing of presence can create spaces of calm, safety, and subtle wonder. Scout lifted his head once more, ears erect, eyes alert, tail flicking in measured sweeps, signaling readiness and curiosity, and Ethan smiled faintly, feeling the gentle magic of the morning, the bond between man and dog, and the quiet unfolding of potential, discovery, and the steady, comforting rhythm of life in harmony with care, trust, and the attentive unfolding of a new day filled with gentle promise, quiet miracles, and shared presence. The morning had fully arrived, the sunlight spilling across the yard in gentle beams that caught the dew on the grass, casting a soft glow over the barn and the worn paths leading through the farm. Scout padded beside Ethan, alert yet calm, amber eyes flicking to every subtle movement, ears twitching at the soft sounds of birds, wind in the maples, and the distant rustle of leaves, tail sweeping slowly with quiet precision. Ethan moved deliberately, adjusting the blanket around the dog once more, brushing gently along his back, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat beneath his hand, a language of trust and understanding forged in the shared hours of attention and care. The air carried the earthy scent of pine, fresh soil, and the faint warmth of sunlight, mingling with the subtle aroma of hay from the barn, a symphony of natural textures that filled the space with calm. Ethan stepped toward the edge of the yard, hand brushing Scout's neck, feeling the dog lean slightly into the touch, eyes bright with awareness and readiness, a companion attuned to every nuance of the world around them. He paused to take in the horizon, where the soft outlines of distant hills met the pale sky, the shimmer of a narrow creek reflecting sunlight in delicate streaks, and the gentle motion of trees in the morning breeze creating a rhythm that resonated with the quiet pulse of life across the farm. Scout shifted, sniffing the earth and glancing up at Ethan, the subtle flick of his ears signaling curiosity and attentiveness, and Ethan felt the connection deepen, the shared understanding of patience, care, and presence grounding each movement, each breath. He bent briefly to smooth the blanket beneath Scout once more, tucking the edges carefully, creating a nest of comfort, a space of security that spoke volumes in the silence of the morning. The barn doors creaked slightly as the wind passed through, and Ethan allowed the cool air to flow inside, carrying the faint fragrance of wildflowers, damp earth, and distant water, weaving through the warmth of the sunlit space. Scout settled his head on the blanket, tail curling, eyes half-lidded yet alert, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing a steady rhythm of companionship. Ethan stepped back, surveying the yard, the barn, and the distant horizon, feeling the subtle magic of the morning, the promise held in light, air, and quiet presence. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We are ready for today, boy." And Scout lifted his head briefly, ears flicking, a small movement of recognition and trust, then settled again, the morning enveloping them both in the calm assurance of shared existence, the rhythm of patience, kindness, and attentive care flowing between them like a gentle, unseen current, marking the quiet, profound miracle of connection that shaped the beginning of a new day filled with promise and the gentle unfolding of life. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, scattering golden light across the rolling hills, the farmyard bathed in a warm, honeyed glow that caught the edges of dew still clinging to the grass. Scout padded beside Ethan, amber eyes bright and alert, nose twitching at the faint scents carried by the gentle breeze, ears swiveling at every subtle movement, tail sweeping slowly with careful rhythm. Ethan adjusted the strap of his jacket, letting the warmth of sunlight brush across his shoulders, and crouched to smooth the blanket under Scout, brushing gently along the fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of the dog's breathing, a language of comfort, trust, and companionship that needed no words. The wind whispered through the maples lining the yard, leaves rustling softly, carrying the faint, earthy aroma of the woods. Beyond, mingling with the sweet, warming scent of hay from the barn, a quiet symphony of life and place. Ethan stood, stepping to the edge of the yard, hand brushing lightly along Scout's neck, feeling the dog lean slightly into the touch, a silent signal of readiness and confidence, the bond between them deepening with every careful gesture. Beyond the barn, the horizon glimmered faintly with the shimmer of a narrow creek reflecting the sun, distant hills outlined softly against the pale sky, and Ethan allowed his gaze to wander across the landscape, taking in the gentle sway of branches, the movement of shadows, the subtle shimmer of morning light on the frost-touched earth. Scout moved a few steps ahead, nose low to the ground, tail sweeping slowly, ears flicking as he tracked subtle shifts in the air, while Ethan followed, each footfall deliberate, grounding him in the rhythm of the morning, the quiet harmony of life that they shared. Ethan adjusted the blanket once more, tucking the edges carefully, creating a small nest of warmth and security for Scout, who lowered his head, settling into the comfort, tail curling around his paws, eyes half-lidded yet alert. The barn doors creaked softly in the morning breeze, the faint rush of wind carrying the distant hum of life through the trees, birds calling softly, insects beginning their gentle chorus, all weaving into the delicate soundtrack of the day. Ethan stepped back, surveying the yard, the barn, and the gentle hills beyond, feeling the steady pulse of presence, patience, and attentive care, the quiet miracle of trust and connection that had grown between man and dog over hours and days, now shining like the sunlight across the farm. Scout lifted his head briefly, ears erect, eyes bright and scanning the horizon, signaling the readiness to explore, to continue the rhythm of life that had been so carefully nurtured. Ethan allowed a small, reflective smile to form as he inhaled deeply, taking in the beauty, the calm, and the promise of the day, feeling the quiet satisfaction of shared trust and companionship, and knowing that even the smallest gestures of care, patience, and attentiveness ripple outward, shaping moments, shaping hearts, and creating a lasting, gentle miracle that carries far beyond sight or sound, a serene affirmation of connection, presence, and the subtle wonder of being together.